call to order the Municipal of Anchorage Ethics and Election Committee meeting for February 25th, 2015. We'll go around the table and introduce ourselves for the record, starting with you, Dee.
Dee Ennis, legal counsel for the Board of Ethics.
David Nesbitt, member or chair of the Board of Ethics.
Jackie Yeagle, elections coordinator.
Amanda Moser, deputy clerk.
Dick Training Assembly.
Pete Peterson Assembly.
Ernie Hall, Assembly. We are going to begin with an update from you, David, so we can take care of your business and let you go do your day's chores.
I appreciate that, Mr. Hall. The only thing that I wanted to update the Assembly with is we've had an issue with Notice of Potential Violation 2014-2, I believe it was. And we had originally written a response to the Notice of Potential Violation that we then modified, edited. I don't know if the members of this committee have had a chance to read.
I know about it.
Do you know about the rewrite also?
Yes, rewrite where you told them to basically have the union do a class on ethics.
Essentially, what happened is we recommend that the
Go to UAA to do it.
go to UAA to do it, and so we modified it to allow a little bit more practicable for them to be able to take a course. We hadn't intended to narrow it, but that was the way they had interpreted it, so they asked us to revise it, so we revised it to allow them to take a class somewhere else. That's what they wanted to do. And also, but we also made the language in there a little bit more pointed, which is what we had softened in the first letter. And we were trying to soften in the first letter because we had no intention. We were trying very hard to avoid impugning any credibility of any members of the fire department or the union or anybody else. We spent a great deal of time and effort and energy debating how to word our first document. We came out with it and then realized that after we'd softened all the language, the penalty may have seemed too harsh because we'd softened the language of our findings so much. So what we did is, when we revised it, we said, okay, you want a revision. This was based on a motion, not a motion, but it was a request for reconsideration from council for the firefighters, for the union. And so we said, okay, we are willing to modify the terms of our recommendation for the penalty, but we also want to make sure that it's clear that we did find that the testimony of the firefighters lacked credibility. And so that also was in order to substantiate our the basis of our first letter as well. So I believe, and I understand that council for the firefighters, and I don't even know if she represented the firefighters or the union specifically.
She does both at
She
different times.
at this moment, it's both, and so she has had a chance to review it, and I think she's come back and she has contacted Dee and suggested the union has a program or a class of some kind for the ethics training. And so my understanding is that that's progressing, that there isn't any more flack from that. And part of the reason too that we were in that first letter, we were trying to be very respectful of not only the members, the firefighters, but also of the process, because we didn't want to get too involved in letters of reprimand, any kind of administrative thing that the union is typically involved in doing. We had no intention of sticking our nose into that kind of business. We wanted to respect the process as much as we could, and also deliberate at great length to come up with the response that we did. That was our update. And then, do the members of the committee have any questions for me at this point on this issue?
I haven't actually seen it, David.
Okay.
If it came through, I missed it, but it certainly sounds to me like it was handled appropriately.
I think it was. I think the process worked quite well, actually. Yeah.
Dick?
Just thank you for the manner in which you handled it, because I could read between the lines on the first one, and you were trying to not call them less than credible, and I
That's
appreciate that. I'm sorry they didn't catch it.
They asked us
I know.
for the reconsideration. And so we said, okay, here you go. You know, I
But,
mean,
and this is why.
and this is why. And so we said, okay, here's our response. We really worked hard at.
I really appreciate what you guys did the
Yeah.
first time.
Have you seen that, Pete?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah,
It's a public record now. It's all out there.
Yeah.
So everybody should have access to a copy if they want.
Could we have that forwarded to us?
What you
Now
should
that we've
receive-
got knowledge, we should know the background.
What you should receive are 4 documents, if you'd like to review it all, depending on what you want. There is the
Lisa can send that to all of us.
Thank you, Lisa.
There is the original document, which is the original report. Actually, it's essentially a brief from Sarah Josephson, who is the counsel for the firefighters and for the union, from Jermaine Dunnigan and Owens. She has an initial 3 or 4 page briefing on what she felt the interpretation of the code should be. Then there was our first response to the NOPV. Then there's her request for reconsideration, and then there is our final response and recommendations. So there are 4 main documents in addition to the NOPV itself, which is just the 1 page.
Let the record reflect that we've been joined by Mr. Honeman. Dee?
Ernie, do you know what the whole issue was?
No, I don't.
Oh,
This was firefighters appearing in some version of a firefighter's uniform to oppose AO 37. The different flyers that were received went out in the mail.
these were the flyers. I don't know if you can see from here, the flyers that went out in the mail for
Okay.
the no on one.
And a private citizen made a complaint.
You could,
I
in
believe
fact,
it was
read who they
citizen.
were.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have backed up a little bit further and started further at the beginning.
No. Very good.
I'm sorry for the little delay. In general, what was the finding?
Well, what we did is we originally came out with a finding that was softened quite a bit, and then we also recommended some ethics training for the firefighters.
Well, the finding was that they had violated the ethics
Yes.
code, that they wore, their uniform was official enough, that they acknowledged if someone looked at the picture, would they think it was an Anchorage firefighter? Yes. That they went too far, they were in official capacity when they, with these flyers in the mail that were opposed to AO 37.
That's right. And so these are based on the flyers, and also we compared it a little bit to some of the leaflets and flyers that went out from APD, which were markedly different. And so we were comparing, and what essentially they were using is uniforms. The uniforms were slightly outdated, but they were still uniforms. And so that was really where it came down to, whether the uniforms had been altered enough to fit within the code. That's kind of what the basis was. And so what ended up happening is we had the first document, then a response, and then our last series of recommendations, which essentially recommended ethics training. And that's in summary.
Thank you.
Any other question? I'm assuming you're proceeding ahead with your rewrite of the ethics. We'll be bringing that forward to us at some point in time and doing a condensed, as Mr. Trainee said, if you lost 20 pages, it would be a...
I want to see at least 20% of it gone, so
And I don't disagree with you.
I'm sorry.
I think that we are setting up a meeting for the first part of March, or the middle of March, and I think that that's where we're really going to start looking into this more carefully.
Good. Dee?
Chair, I don't think anybody has formally said what they
Right.
want. We're hearing it third hand that there are members here that have said, can't you get that code in a more manageable fashion, much shorter and
Yeah.
straightforward? And so we haven't been talked to directly, but we're hearing that. So maybe if people here know that, they can give us direction. Because again, we were told that there's an initial meeting to discuss this.
Right.
Sure. Dick?
It started out as 5 pages, then went to 55. I know what our intention is. We want to have a well-rounded ethics policy, but I just think somewhere in between 5 to 55 is reality. I don't want so much verbiage in there the average person couldn't understand it. So, let us know how we can help you. I think you guys have had problems with it. You've seen where it needs some work. Bring it to us. We're more than happy to work with you on it. I appreciate what you guys do.
And I assume at that meeting, we'll have somebody from this
Right.
committee there. It's not going to just be us, I assume.
Well, if those are our marching orders, hey,
Yeah.
can't you simplify this, then that's probably enough. I don't know if there's anything further behind that request.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll address that. Paul?
Ms. Jones has some too.
Yeah.
I concur with Mr. Trainee. I know that what you've done with you used to get inundated with the gifts from the kids or parents of kids in schools, and that just really absorbed a lot of your time. And so looking at that and realizing how to make it more succinct and clear, I think that was more of that is what I guess I'm looking at is just if there's some things that, as Mr. Trainee said, that are just making it so cumbersome or so hard to interpret. And I think one of the examples you just gave was a perfect, something that makes it very clear.
Barbara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, Mr. Trainee asked me to submit the request to a small group of people to create a drafting committee to start looking at the ethics code. And as this committee well knows, Mr. Trainee and Mr. Honeman were on what was a towing committee, and so we set up a drafting subcommittee for that worked very well. Mr. Hall and the rest of this committee knows that we did the same thing. Amanda Moser and Dennis Wheeler and I were on a drafting committee for Title 28, which we brought back to this committee and the Assembly for approval. And that was the model that Mr. Trainee asked me to follow. And that's why we sent an email to the small group to begin the discussion and decide probably who should be on that drafting committee. And so we'll look forward to that meeting sometime in March.
Yeah,
There are
David.
two people on the board, Bill Falsey and Terry Kelly. Those are likely going to be the representatives from our committee who will be participating in the redrafting. They have a real talent for that. I think that whoever else is on the committee will really enjoy working with them, and I expect good things.
Very good. Well, we've covered basically where I would have gone is I wouldn't expect the committee to just arbitrarily go in and rewrite, that you would get input from this body to you and what the concerns were, and it appears that we're already headed in that direction. So we will continue with that, and once we get that first draft done, what I'll do is make a point to have a meeting of this committee with your committee, and we can do it and then kind of hand it off to you at that point. Sound workable?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else of the Ethics Committee? Thank you. As always, great job. Ms. Moser, update on the regular municipal election of 2015. That's coming up pretty quick, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, we're about 35 days out, 36 days out. It's terrifying. So, since we last met, oh, did you have a question?
Just how's your room going downstairs? You starting to take it over?
Yeah. Have you been down there?
I was there this morning. I just want to tell you, the election's starting to happen.
Yeah. So, since we met last, we have had the filing for office open and closed. We have 11 candidates for the office of the mayor. We have 2 candidates for each of the school board seats. And then of the 30 limited road service areas, we have 24 candidates who have filed for those seats. So we have 6 that have no candidate that filed. So filing for office opened and closed, and then since then I have been working, we've been working to create the ballots. The ballots have been created, they've been proofed by our office, by me, by Jackie Yeagle, our elections coordinator, by Barbara Jones, municipal clerk, and by the Department of Law. And then we sent the ballots down to the printer. We received our test deck this morning from the printer. I worked on the ballot order this weekend, and I completed it on Monday, and I submitted it to Barbara Jones for her approval, and then submitted it to the printer. Just so everybody knows, we have ordered a significant amount of ballots. We have ordered a large amount of ballots that are going to all the precincts, along with ballots at all of our absentee locations. And one of the things that's really complicated about our ballot order is it's really easy in a precinct when there's just one ballot style to order ballots you order ballots for that precinct, and then you make sure that ballot style is available at all the absentee locations. One of the challenges is we have a significant number of precincts, mostly on the hillside area, but some also in the Eagle River, Chugiak area that have more than one ballot style within that precinct. My favorite one is Precinct 110, has 13 ballot styles in it. So it's really challenging when you get down to those sort of smaller parcels of land to determine how many ballots to order at the precinct, and then also that particular ballot style. So maybe there's this small swath of land that potentially there's only, like 25 houses in. We still have to order ballots for those 25 houses for at the polling place on election day. And what if one of those people wants to vote absentee by mail or absentee in person at City Hall or Lusac Library? So one thing that really makes the ballot order quite challenging is just all those little splits. And those are caused in this election by the ballots bonds for the road service area, the park service area, the fire service area, and then the limited road service areas are the big problems with the split ballots. But we've been working closely with GIS out of AWU's Center for Excellence, and with Tina Miller's help, we have been really able to work on identifying, based on the state's voter registration database and the municipalities mapping who is where. And so my struggles that I've had this year with the ballot order, we are going to be able to, within the next couple weeks, put some hard numbers behind with Tina Miller's help. And so I will be able to really recognize how close I am on those ballot order numbers. And I think that'll really help moving forward with the election process. One thing that I did last year is I captured all of the information on ballots issued based on ballot style at all the precincts. And so when I did my ballot order this year, one of the columns in my spreadsheet down the side is how many ballots were issued of that ballot style. So I can see, and I was really good. I had lots of room to spare on all my numbers, but it was really good to see who's voting what ballot style where, and that really helps with the ballot order.
Dick, you had a question?
Just a question. We assume we're going to have a runoff.
Yes.
How much time do you need after the election is done so you can get the ballots ready to go for the runoff? And have we appropriate enough money to do a runoff?
Those are excellent questions. Thank you for asking those. Through the chair. We have been preparing for a potential runoff election. It is something that we've thought about 6 months ago, knowing that we were going into a mayoral election. As you're aware, anytime a mayoral candidate must receive 45% of the vote. And so we have been anticipating the potential of a runoff election and our whole preparations leading into this. But once filing for office closed and the last day for candidates to withdraw passed, and we recognized we had 11 candidates on the ballot, we recognized that it's increased the probability of having a runoff election. So we set the runoff election date for May 5th. And we set that back in November. And that was a conversation with the clerk's office and Dennis Wheeler about what date to choose. And so just so you're familiar with our thought process, we looked at 2009, which was the last runoff election. And we looked at the date that was chosen then, which was also May 5th from the April 7th election then. And so then we looked at a few other things. We read code, and code just says that it has to be within 3 weeks of certification. So we fall in line with the code on that. And then we sort of looked at the clerk's office mission statement. And our mission statement is, part of it includes to increase voter turnout and sort of have these open, accessible elections. And we recognize that having an election closer to, having the runoff closer to the regular election date would increase voter turnout because voters would still be cognizant of the regular election that we had. And we also recognize that the further we pushed the election into May, we had the potential of losing more residents to Alaskan summers. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were able to engage as many Anchorage voters in the election as possible. So we had the conversation in our office that we recognize it's going to be a lot of work on our part to have it so close together. But we have been preparing for that since we've been recognizing there's a potential for a runoff election. And so we have additional staff in place to help. And we set up with our GEMS, the software that we use for our ballot creation, so that when they come up on election day for our election day support, they will stay an extra day to help us create the ballots for the runoff that next day.
Now, do you have to wait until we certify the elections before you can order the ballots? Because I want to try and reduce your time frame.
That's an excellent question. I think it all depends on the numbers.
Okay.
So if it's clear that there's two candidates that are the top two candidates and there's not the potential for somebody to flip, we will move forward with that. But if it's, if a couple of candidates, based on the numbers and the number of outstanding votes that we have, those are things that we'll have to look
Next time they
into.
ask for recount.
Yeah.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman. Cost.
Oh,
How are you doing
excellent.
for money?
So Barbara and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and I said, we budgeted for the regular election,
But not the runoff.
but we did not budget for the runoff. And so Barbara and I are working to prepare numbers for the first quarter budget revisions that will reflect the cost of a potential runoff. Well, at that time, we'll know for sure if it's a runoff or not, so we'll have those numbers.
Thank you, Amanda. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Paul?
It's a question I need answered.
Well, those are some questions I had, so I thank you for the training. Ms. Moserwood, going back briefly to the different ballot styles and all that, what would it take, or is there anything that can be done to clean that up? I mean, is there something that we can do either under the code, or is it something we can work with drawing lines? I don't know what it would take. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, excellent question. Thank you for asking that through the chair. One thing that we have recognized is the limited road service areas, having them on the regular municipal ballot creates some challenges. And I kind of want to talk through this so that you kind of understand what I'm talking about. The limited road service areas, they are these volunteer boards. They're not paid, and they handle the street maintenance up, mostly in the hillside area. A lot of the members on these boards have served for 20, 30 years. They've been involved in this service for a long time. And one of the challenges with them being on the ballot is that not only do they need to file their declaration of candidacy with our office, but they also have to fill out APOC paperwork. And the APOC paperwork is probably where there's a lot of challenges. It's a little bit confusing. I know since I've been in the clerk's office since 2010, APOC's requirements have changed. You used to be able to fill out a paper copy, and now it has to be all submitted digitally. And so I can tell you I've always heard sort of comments here and there from the limited road service area candidates that we don't even get paid and we have to do this, sort of that kind of comment. I would say in the past 2 years, it is increasing in the amount that I'm hearing. I hear it, and the other woman that hears it is Therese Williams, who is the limited road service area staff support out of maintenance. And so one thing that we have talked about in the clerk's office, and I think we would like to move forward with talking about with the limited road service areas, is is potentially moving them off the ballot and having the opportunity to go to an appointment. And we've talked about a lot of different ways that that could look. You know, maybe the limited road service area would suggest candidates that they want, and then it would be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the assembly. I think that there's a lot of different ways that we can look at it, but recognizing that these are, you know, unpaid volunteer positions, and it is a lot of extra potential challenges for them to come down and fill out all this APOC paperwork and declaration of candidacy. And one thing that's been happening and over the last couple of years is people aren't filing. They're asking their neighbors to write them in. So they're sort of going around the declaration of candidacy process and the APOC paperwork process. And they're just having a couple people write them in. And so this sort of like gets around the system, but creates a ton of additional work on our end. So we have to find all the precincts that had that limited road service area. We have to go through all those ballots, identify all the candidates that got write-in votes, and then we have to confirm if that person is a registered voter, confirm if they live within that limited road service area. And once we've done all that, we've determined it's a real person, they are eligible. You know, we have to contact that person and see if they even want to serve. But what happens is we'll get, you know, a few different people that all get 2 write-in votes. And so then we have 3 candidates that are all qualified for the same limited road service area. And I know when Dick was chair a couple years ago, he can tell you
Had to
about
flip a coin.
flipping coins.
Decide who won the election.
So that begs the question, is it something that we could redo in the code that we could then perhaps, I'm thinking more along the line of get back to grassroots, let the community councils have an appointment type thing. Maybe we could put it in the charter or not charter, but or ask for a charter change or something where it can be an appointment based on what the community council does. It's generally their area anyway.
The limited road service area, you
Right.
mean? And so we would want to make sure that it's just the limited road service area that has, because they are having a special assessment on their taxes. One thing that would have to happen is it would need to go out as a vote. So the whole limited road service area would have to vote yes or no if they wanted to go to an appointment process. So it was one thing that we had looked at this year about putting it on all the ballots, because then, you know, we already had the candidates on the ballots and you just have this question, yes or no. But we did not move forward on that this year.
Okay.
And the clerk's office has been talking with the assembly members in that district, so Assemblymember Johnston and Assemblymember Evans.
We have one up in Basher.
Oh yeah, 935 precinct. Section 6.
By precinct.
Yeah, Section 6 Campbell Airstrip. And that one's really special because it's this limited road service area, and then within that, there's a square
Yes.
that's a park service area.
Mhm.
And that one is so bizarre.
Yes.
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you were talking about, you know, the election and the runoff, and I was wondering if you found enough election workers to staff both of those elections, or even one at this point.
Excellent question, thanks. And through the chair, Pat Oldenburg is our elections recruiter, and she has been working pretty steadily since January to staff our precincts. And as of this morning, we had a chairperson for every single precinct, which is pretty huge. And we just needed one field worker. And so we are in a pretty good spot. One thing that Pat has been checking up with all of our election workers is all of our paperwork had them sign up for both the regular election and potential runoff. And so she is calling all of our, about 650 election workers and confirming that they are, in fact, able to work the potential runoff on May 5th, because not everyone had marked both boxes. And so we just want to make sure that specifically every chair and co-chair that we hire are able to be at both elections. we don't anticipate that we will have any training sessions between the regular and runoff elections, so every election worker needs to attend a training session before the first election. So, and going just on with my update from this year, I talked about the ballot order. So one thing we are setting up for is next week we're going to test the ballots, and then we will go into election worker training the following week. When I took this position in 2012, I presented Barbara with 5 major changes that I wanted to make for elections, and the first change was training. We used to have 4 training sessions for 600 election workers. So each training session would have 150, 200 people in it, and it was very challenging to explain how to do a complex task to a large audience like that. And so one thing that I said is I wanted to redo the whole training session, and that means that we now do 16 training sessions with 40 people in each session. So it is it's a lot of work for our elections department because it is about 8 really long full days of, I say the same thing 16 times in a row, but we really recognize that it is very beneficial to our election workers and, more importantly, to the election process on a whole, to make sure that the people that have the direct contact with all the voters are really familiar with the whole process, and should we have any challenges that arise on election day, we want to make sure that the election workers are prepared to handle those as they may come up.
Mr. Trainee.
Just imagine, I've heard from a lot of people gone through that, and they appreciate your new way of doing it.
Thank you.
They were here when we had the old way of doing it, and to a person, they say you do a great job. So
Thank
even
you.
though I know after you, for a while, it gets, this number 15, one more to go.
Yeah,
I appreciate the training you give the workers.
Thank you. I definitely have a countdown.
The other thing is we've got to do something about the requirement to be under APOC, because APOC is expanding what they want. Now you've got to give your spouse's information too, and that becomes so intrusive into somebody that's on a limited road service area board. I can see them telling you, forget it, I'm not going to do it, because they're not paid. They're just, it's public service. So if we can appoint members and get them out of APOC, I'm willing to see what we can do to get around it, because APOC's becoming a real problem.
Yeah. Paul?
And just briefly, my wife many years ago had volunteered for both the state and a municipal election, and I remember her sharing, and this is from way back, so a couple of clerk changes ago, that the training seemed to be lacking and was kind of watered down. I mean, it was really difficult for her to track. So I laud you for taking on the effort, and I agree with you. It may seem a bit cumbersome, but I totally believe that our election process will be better for it. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
What I'm going to suggest, Mr. Chairman, is this is a conversation we had every year that I was chair. It's every year you've been chair. It's every year anybody's been chair. So what I'm going to suggest is, following this election, when we get past it, that we actually put together an action plan so we address this prior to our next election. I would assume that would mean we would begin to start with the legal department, Dick, in a discussion of what we got to do. And the notes that I made that we need to address is looking at an exemption from the APOC requirement, whatever needs to be done to address that. Look at appointments as opposed to election. But if we don't go that way, we would certainly look, as you've suggested in the past, Amanda, doing mail-out ballots to these service districts. Can't do that?
I would say, I know before I ran my first election, I had suggested doing that, and that would not be my recommended route that we take, because then we're doing 2 elections.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would create a ton of additional separate work. So like right now, the limited road service areas and the separate ballot styles, they're like a minor nuisance, if you will. I don't mean that in a negative way. Like they're just extra, sort of an extra step
Right.
that we go through. But if we had them as a mail-out ballot, we would be running essentially 2 elections.
Okay.
So that I know that I was the one that originally brought that up, but it was
Okay.
It was the night.
Then what I suggest is on our first agenda, our first meeting following the election, when we're done with the runoff, the whole deal, you've got time to do it, then I want that to be an item on our agenda, and I want to invite the legal department to attend that meeting with us so we can have a conversation about what we need to do in order to address this and quit talking about it.
okay.
Good idea, Ernie.
And
Okay.
maybe we can invite Assemblymember Johnson and Evans, since it's their area also.
Okay, Paul?
And Mr. Hall, I would, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also encourage us to put that information to the Federation of Community Councils and the LRSAs themselves to make sure that their input is also received. We don't want to do anything behind the scenes. And, some people may think that it's okay, whereas we all know that most likely it's a pain, just as much of a
Yeah.
pain and inconvenience. to them.
No, I'm all in favor of making sure that we do this in a very open and transparent
Sure,
way
sure,
because
sure.
I would want to make sure they were on board.
Well,
But
that's-
no matter what we do, it will come back to them to vote on
Absolutely.
it anyways too. So, but I do think they should be part of the conversation,
Okay,
especially
very good. Dick?
Amanda, one last question. How many seats do we have that nobody's filed for?
6.
So what's our next step for those 6 seats? Should we just not fill them, or what do
So
we
they,
do?
those 6 seats are on the ballot as a write-in, as required by municipal code. And so after Election Day, we will review the ballots in those limited road service areas, and we will determine who got write-in votes, and then once we determine who had the winning amount of write-in votes, we'll determine if they are a candidate or
Eligible.
Can hold the
eligible.
seat.
Yeah, and so it does. And one of the challenging parts about having it done by write-in is we don't certify the write-ins right away because it has all that extra step that we have to do. And so last year we weren't able to certify those until it was either June or July. And so then that board is without a member for a significant amount of time because of the additional work that is required on the back end. So I think that that's a challenging part of it too. And I'm not sure if because usually I think that we'll have to make sure that there's no one acting in that role if they're not actually.
Because if my name's written in as Bob and my name's Robert, that presents another problem to you because the name has to be exactly the same.
It doesn't.
How do you determine?
Yeah, so then that requires just some additional steps for us to determine if that person. I mean,
So anyway,
yeah.
And I thought your name was Dick all this time.
whatever, Ernest. But the problem with write-ins, they've
Oh,
got.
I know.
You-know?
It's a nightmare.
And I remember that one election that went south, so you guys did such a good job picking us up from that.
Mhm.
My thanks to the clerk's office, because you recovered from that unfortunate incident.
Yeah. Item 4, 2016 election stakeholders group.
So one thing we've been talking about in the clerk's office, Jackie and I and Barbara have been having a conversation about. We've been having a conversation about alternative voting methods, and we think that it might be an opportunity to gather some community members who would be part of a stakeholders group to have a conversation about the way the municipal elections will look in the future. I think this might be a great way to get some buy-in from the public and have a public conversation about a public process. So I wanted to sort of talk about that with this group and see if you were interested in forming a stakeholders group. I know the clerk's office has had a few conversations about potential members of our stakeholders group. We haven't contacted anyone yet, but just thoughts on that.
Paul?
Yeah, I think I totally agree, particularly as we're trying or attempting to go mail-in or electronic, hopefully in the future, something other than what we've been doing, in the attempts to both make it more convenient and at the same time increase voter turnout. It's going to present a lot of challenges, and of course, for every, just as we were talking about before, maybe we can handle them as a separate mail-in for the nurses, and you find that there's other challenges that come to it. And I do believe that it's what you just said earlier, if for no other reasons, the transparency of having a collective input from interested members of the community. I don't know what it looks like in the sense, realistically, if it were an open, anybody that wants to apply, do we have an application process? Is it a nomination? Is it a grassroots to, for instance, each community council has a federation's representative, so there's already some orchestration of, I guess you'd say, there's already some vetting being done at the grassroots level. So perhaps we go to the federation and ask for a representative from each community council. Seems like a fairly easy way to do it. But then again, I don't know. Does a community council have to have somebody that comes if they opt out? I think we ought to do it in some orderly way, so that you don't just get someone that wants to throw a wrench in every suggestion or idea and make a meeting just be a meeting.
Dick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amanda, if you and Barbara could get together and work out the details on what you want to say, let us know the size of the group. Then we'll work with you to make arrangements to get these people appointed. Much like we did with the aftermath of AO 37. We had the CIS group come together. That's about the right size to work on this. And we had a cross-section of people in Anchorage that were here from the charter inception to now. We can get good qualified people that want to help make this system work. And if you guys can work on the framework of what we need, we're more than happy to work with you on it. From my perspective.
Pete?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was wondering, is forming the stakeholder group, is that going to slow the situation down enough to where we're not going to be able to switch over to vote by mail at the next election? Just throwing that out there.
That's a good question. I think my hope would be that the stakeholder group would be invested in the municipal elections, and I like the idea of a team of rivals. I'd like to bring in people with differing viewpoints and have the conversation, and with the hopes of still being able to explore alternative voting options for 2016.
It would be my guess that you and Barbara, between what we dealt with in 2012 and people that were involved in that very closely, that were definite contributors to it. My guess is the two of you are going to be able to come up with a pretty good idea of kind of the size this group should be and the composition of it. And I think the thing that would be important is you put that together, bring it back to the body, and then we would provide the opportunity for maybe, I will use the term, some of the usual suspects outside of that, maybe 3 or 4 seats that we could put, but it needs to be a manageable group. If we're looking at somebody from every community council, it's way too large at that point, I think. And what happens is every meeting you spend re-educating half the people that weren't at the last meeting. So it needs to be some people that, number one, really want to be a part of it, are willing to give the time and know what they're involved in.
Through the chair, I thank you. I appreciate that feedback. One thing that we have discussed in our office, and one thing we've looked at, is other jurisdictions that have gone to vote by mail and how they did it. And so one thing that I think we've talked about with the stakeholders group is to have community members that bring a wide range of perspectives, but also expertise. Because I think we're going to want to make sure that we walk through this sort of understanding every potential concern that may be brought up as we go through this. And so if we have an eclectic group of invested, community members that might be with diverse backgrounds, might really help us.
Very well. Anybody else? In the 2016 election, Amanda and I had a conversation earlier this week about interfacing with the Lieutenant Governor's office in regards to some things we're probably going to need from them in regards to this election. So after that conversation, which I guess happened yesterday, I actually called the Lieutenant Governor's office this morning and left a message to see about getting a meeting put together with Lieutenant Governor Malott to have a conversation because we're going to need signatures in order to be able to do a mail-in ballot, and the repository for that logically would be the state, and to see if they're already addressing that or if they're thinking about doing it or if they would give consideration to it. So what I did was call and ask for the appointment, and when I get a call back, I've already shared with Amanda, but Barbara, I think the three of us and Mr. Trainee, if you want to be a part of that meeting,
I would like
to be able to go and sit down with the Lieutenant Governor and give him an idea of what we're giving consideration to. It may be very possible the state's thinking about moving in that same direction. But I also think it's important to just sit down and have a meeting with the new Lieutenant Governor in regards to future elections anyway. So I'm sure I'll be getting a call back, and as soon as I do, what I may end up doing is talk with Byron, and I'll say I'll have my people talk to your people, and then you can get the meeting put together.
That's good. Thank
Okay?
you.
Good. Anything else from the committee this morning?
I just wanted to echo again, or express my gratitude towards Amanda and the clerk's office for the efforts they're going through. I know it's no small one, and it's, as you say, I know earlier you said terrifying. I look at it as challenging, but at the same time, I feel very comforted that I know that you've got some seasoning behind you and that you've done such a superb job getting things done already and in preparation of going forward. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Man, can we make sure the room that you guys use downstairs, the lighting is ready to go before we have people in there trying to see what they can because the lighting's bad? Remember that one year where they didn't have the janitor working on the day you guys were down there counting? So we just need to make sure that the city manager has that room fixed up, because I don't want you guys to say, well, they can't see what they're looking at. That's all right.
Okay, thank you. Audience participation.
My name is Eugene Haberman. I just want to make a note for the record for those listening to this tape afterwards that I was at this meeting, the entire meeting. That's all. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Anyone else? None?
Move to adjourn.
Adjourned. Thank you.